Good evening. I'm Kathy Petroni, the president of the Lansing Area League of Women Voters. Welcome to the webinar, What If Nothing Was Waste? Introducing the Circular Economy. This event is organized by our environmental advocacy group, which we refer to as EAGERS. I understand that many of us right now are feeling very overwhelmed by the daily chaotic events that threaten our nation's democracy. Our attention has been focused on the new war in Iran, the mass deportation efforts, the Epstein files, and the threats to our fair and free elections. I hope many of you will be joining us for No King's Day 3 on March 28th to demonstrate our opposition to the direction our country is heading. Tonight, we're going to take a break from those concerns. And instead, we're going to focus on something also very important, which is protecting our environment. The League of Women Voters has been at the forefront of the environmental protection movement for decades. We consistently support legislation to preserve our nation's natural resources and protect our public health. At the local level, our EAGERS seek to educate our membership and the public on environmental and sustainability issues, as well as encouraging and enabling all of us to act to combat threats to our environment. The webinar is going to proceed as follows. One of our co-chairs of EAGERS, Ellen Link, is going to be the one that will introduce each of our speakers. Each speaker will get to speak for 25 minutes, leaving some time for questions and answers at the end. If you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A feature in Zoom. As the questions come in, we have a member who's going to be monitoring the Q&A, the questions coming in. She will collect them and organize them and share them with the speakers. So at the end, as much as time allows, we'll let the speakers answer your questions. You will not have access to the chat function during the presentations. Now I'm going to hand it off to Ellen, who will introduce our first speaker.
Good evening. The circular economy is all about closing the loop, making sure that what we use finds its way back into the system rather than disappearing into a landfill. Our first speaker has spent her career doing exactly that. Karen O'Brien is the executive director of the Michigan Recycling Coalition, a role she has held across two stints totaling 24 years. Under Karen's leadership, the coalition has educated and mobilized businesses, governments, nonprofits, and everyday Michiganders to improve how we use and recover our shared resources. Want an inside view on how the Part 115 legislation created to update Michigan's solid waste laws was finally passed? Talk to Karen. She served on environmental and recycling commissions at the local, state, and national levels, and previously ran her own consulting firm, helping environmental nonprofits like Tip of the Mitt Watershed Council and Michigan Nature Association. Karen holds a degree in social science from Michigan State University and received executive director training with the Institute of Conservation Leadership. Closer to home, Karen serves on the Environmental Council's Policy Committee, so she arrives today not just as a guest, but as a colleague and partner. When she's not keeping Michigan's resources in circulation, she's out in Michigan's natural spaces, working on home projects and spending time with her two kids and two cats. Please welcome Karen O'Brien.
Thank you for that warm welcome, Ellen. I appreciate that. Give me a moment while I share my screen. And I'm trusting that you're seeing that just fine. That's great. So Karen O'Brien, I've been leading the Michigan Recycling Coalition for a very long time, but the Recycling Coalition got its start back in 1982, and it was with the spirit of recycling coordinators at the very beginning of this age of recycling that we're in right now. Coordinators had a need to talk to each other to learn how to better do their programming. And it's from there that we've really made our place in this world. The Michigan Recycling Coalition now has several different programs and 7 different staff members. We work on organics recycling, composting and whatnot. We work on inorganic recycling, which is everything you put into your recycling bin. But we also do special projects and programs. Education of residential customers is one of those areas that we seek to engage and uplift recycling information and knowledge, but we also do a boat wrap recycling program organizing with our partners, just to give you an idea of where we are. We have an annual conference every year. That annual conference welcomes, about 400 different professionals, and every conference we aim to advance the agenda of recycling in Michigan. So I'm here tonight to give you a little bit of information about what it is we do and how we go about doing it, and what your role is here. So today we're talking about the circular economy, and very simply, it means moving from this linear, you buy the stuff, you use the stuff, and then you dispose of the stuff, to a more circular way where the stuff that we use, the packaging that we consume, actually goes back into making new products. You need a whole system in place to make those new products. And what I think is very interesting about recycling in general is that the EPA estimates that 40% of all greenhouse gas emissions in the United States result from the production, transportation, consumption, and disposal of material goods. And so it's a really high impact work that we're trying to change. And it's distributed around households and businesses across the state. So it's a very challenging thing to do differently. Approximately, Michiganders, businesses, residents spend about $1 billion managing their waste every year. That is what we pay to have our garbage and recycling picked up at the curb and then managed. And finally, landfilled, because most of our waste is still landfilled. That's a lot of money to spend on a system. And one of the things that we've been doing in the past, 44 years is really trying to make this waste visible. I think a lot of people see, put it at their curb and it goes away and nobody really knows what happens to it. We are trying to make that visible, because it's only when you make waste visible that you think differently about it. You'll hear from Dan Schoonmaker later on this evening, and he did a report, his company did a report, and identified that we are currently throwing away or paying to landfill approximately $600 million in material that we could recover and use. So there's a lot of value that is being wasted. And if you've been paying attention to the media, recycling it gets a hard time from the media. There's always an article coming out about how recycling isn't working and how it's not working well and how it's broken. And we aim to educate every one of you that recycling works. Recycling employs lots of people. Recycling puts feedstock back into the hands of manufacturers that can make new products from it. And it is worth our time and energy, especially because we can reduce greenhouse gases that way as well. Approximately 25% of our municipal solid waste is recycled right now. That compares to the national average. That's about 34%. Michigan has really gained a lot of ground in the past 10 years on recycling. And that is because we're starting to spend money on this. We're starting to provide grants and support communities that have found their way to recycling and provide those services. If we reach our goal, which is the state goal of 45% recycling, it means real economic development potential for Michigan, employing more people, bringing more labor revenue, and recycling really creates well over $33 billion of economic output. So doing more recycling is of benefit to local, state, and regional economies. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know what's happening with this particular slide, but no, I want to go back to it. Um, Apologize for what it looks like, but the main point of this slide is, according to the EPA, Michigan, you see the bright red state, Michigan, right there, um, sends to landfill more waste per capita than any other state in the union. We don't really know exactly why this is, but our best guess is that Michigan is a high manufacturing state, and manufacturing produces a lot of waste, but also our state landfill rates are artificially low because of some of our policies. And almost one quarter of the waste that is disposed of in Michigan is generated by out-of-state partners, primarily Canada. But there's nothing we can do except for maybe banning material from the landfill that could stop this waste from being disposed of in Michigan because of international trade laws. And so the Michigan Recycling Coalition for years has really been on, on the march to really help us identify what we could be doing differently. And as I mentioned before, Michigan solid waste policy has really been focused on making sure that we have all the landfills we need to dispose of our waste. And Michigan policy for most of our recent history has been, I think, focused on assuring disposal capacity. But we have been working with the Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy over about 10 to 12 years to redefine that policy for Michigan and turn our solid waste policy into a materials management policy and prioritize managing Michigan's end of life materials, but doing it in a way so that we can advance productive use of that waste. So materials management capacity really means the capacity to recycle and compost and do other productive things rather than just landfill material. In 2025, every Michigan county is required by state to do something called materials management planning. This used to be called solid waste planning, but materials management planning is really now about knowing what kind of facilities are in the county that could landfill waste, could burn waste, could recycle materials, could compost materials, to know what your capacity is for managing all the waste in that county. It's also an opportunity to understand the generation of these materials in the county so you can assure that you have all the capacity needed to manage waste at the end of its life. So, for example, I live in Ingham County. Ingham County right now is engaging stakeholders in a conversation to understand what the materials management capacity needs are based on the population, based on the commercial activity in the county, based on industrial needs in the county, to make sure that they have facilities in place to manage all these material at the end of their life and services in place to manage all this material. So the real goal of materials management planning is to remove the policy preference for disposal and transfer that if counties can demonstrate that they have the means and ability to manage waste through recycling and composting, then they are not as required to have as much disposal capacity as we as previously spoke. Michigan policy is that was driving disposal capacity required counties to assure that they had 5.5 years disposal capacity for 100% of the waste in the county. Now, if you can demonstrate that, 60% of your waste or 30% of your waste can be handled through recycling or composting, then your capacity for disposal is lessened and your need for landfill growth and expansion is also lessened. So it's a way for communities to take control of the infrastructure that they have in their counties, so that we're not siting landfills across the landscape, because landfills will remain forever, tombs in the ground to our waste problem. So materials management planning is really also to make sure that we can site facilities like compost sites or materials recovery facilities, recycling plants. We need to make sure that we can site those facilities, and the state has a role in siting if for some reason there are some local disagreements about what can be cited. We term this NIMBY, not in my backyard. When citizens come up to say that we don't want landfills, okay, the way you don't have landfills is by having the proper capacity to compost your material and recycle that material. So there's several goals around materials management planning, and every county in Michigan right now is having conversations to determine what kind of facilities and services their communities need to be able to reach recycling and composting goals. So generally speaking, when we think about recycling, we think about really our systems should be able to handle about 70% of the waste that we throw away every day. Recycling and composting systems. So when you think about the packaging that flows through our hands every day from the products that we use in the kitchen or in the bathroom, and that we put in our recycling bins, to the products that the uneaten food or the yard waste that we manage every day, 70% of our municipal solid waste can be recycled if we have all of the system in place to do so. We think we can design recycling for some of those outlying materials. So a designable, situation may be tires, for instance. Tires is not something you're going to put in your curbside recycling cart, but at a county drop-off day, you can take your tires to be recycled, or you can take your mattresses to be recycled. We're trying to figure out ways to recycle a lot of things. The hardest to recover materials are really only 20%, and we hope to shrink that amount of material over time because we really do want as much of our waste stream to be recovered. But obviously, this represents all of the opportunity we have to do more. And I want to just give you kind of one example of what we mean when we say that recycling is really good for the environment. The picture on the left is a copper mine from North Carolina. In this copper mine, it takes them moving a ton of earth to get 12 pounds of copper out of moving a ton of earth. And you can see the damage it's doing to the landscape. If you're recycling and collecting electronic waste, for instance, from your average households or businesses, a ton, you can get 100 pounds of copper from a ton of electronic waste. And so you can see too, looking at these, that electronics collection and recovery can really happen anywhere in the country, whereas the raw material extraction that we have to do is confined to copper mines and other places that have those stores of copper. And so what we're really talking about is capturing value in the materials that are already circulating in our economy to bring that value back to us. It's not one and done with a computer. Computers components can be melted down and reused to make new computer components, but it requires businesses and residents to do the right thing with their end-of-life materials. So, I've been in the Michigan scene for a very long time, and it's interesting to me that we don't really have any mandatory recycling laws, but we do have policies. Our bottle bill is one policy that we have that puts a arbitrary value on a bottle and can to make sure that that bottle and or can gets taken back to the store. That's an example of a policy that we have here in Michigan that is very successful in making sure that we can capture that material. And the material in the bottle deposit law is generally aluminum, and PET plastic, both very high value materials in the commodities market. Take back programs are programs that we have for electronic waste. The state has an electronic waste take back program. It also has a variety of programs for lead acid batteries take back program. And they have take back programs for tires. So, if you take your car in to get 4 new tires, then that there is requirement for, that service provider to recycle those tires on your behalf. We also have a yard waste ban in Michigan. Back in the 90s, I think we've known this for a long time, but back in the 90s, we decided to do something about it. And so yard waste, that's, grass clippings and leaves, were banned from the landfill because when you put yard waste and leaves in a landfill and then cover it up, you create anaerobic conditions. And anaerobic conditions, when biodegradable material is breaking down in the landfill, contribute methane gas to the environment. And so, banning them from the landfill and managing yard waste differently has made it much easier for us to capture the value of those organics materials. And so, you'll hear me talk a lot about composting. Grass clippings and leaves combined with food waste can be managed in a way that allows the natural biodegradation of that material and puts microorganisms to work, making a really valuable, vital compost, humus that can be added to any soil to improve its function. But surprisingly, we don't have any real policies around these traditional materials. It's the materials management planning process that we have put in place that assures that communities take these issues into consideration and put real programs in place to help residents and businesses participate and recover that material. Many times, these kinds of programs are public-private sector partnerships because it takes a lot of work from the private sector to actually process and make these materials usable for manufacturers, but we require local governments to help to manage the collection programs to pull these materials out of households and businesses. So recycling is really a private-public sector partnership kind of activity, and it requires everybody moving in the same direction to be successful. Organic waste, food waste, yard waste, paper is an organic product, and even though we can recycle that, there's much paper that is soiled. You think of animal bedding and that kind of thing. All of that can be broken down with biological degradation in a composting process, and that compost is a valuable amendment for soils. And so organics management is really seeing a lot of interest these days because the issues surrounding food waste have taken a lot of interest of people in the news, because food waste, when it is put in the landfill, creates methane gas because it degrades anaerobically in a non-oxygen environment. And so there's a lot of attention that food waste is getting, and a lot of work that's being done to reduce food waste or to recover food for animal feed or recover food for human consumption. And then, as its last option, we want to compost that material and then use that to regenerate our soils. So there's a lot about integrating these services, composting services and recycling services, to make sure we're providing a whole class of service opportunities to make it easy for residents to participate in these programs. This is just a sample of some of the things that we manage every day. On the left, you'll see commonly accepted materials in your curbside recycling cart or at your local drop-off. These are very typical materials collected in Michigan recycling programs. Um, the materials on the right here are materials that are still recyclable, but they can't be recycled in curbside carts because recycling plants and materials recovery facilities are not really equipped to manage these materials like these materials are managed. And so there's a lot more products and packaging that are recyclable and not even listed here, because they are all managed in a little bit different way. Ellen Link manages a drop-off site in Langsburg, Michigan, and they collect both sides of these materials, but they also probably collect a much wider variety of materials. And then that material is then consolidated in bales or put in boxes and shipped off when we can get truckloads full of material. Think mattresses, think tires is here, sometimes bulbs, CFL bulbs. There's a whole variety of stuff that you really do have to seek out alternatives for. But if you look, you will find those alternatives. The stuff in the middle really are stuff that kind of span both kinds of programs. Household hazardous waste are those kind of chemicals that we use in the household that can be bad for the environment and even human health. And those need to be either reused or disposed of properly in a hazardous waste landfill. Um, Residential use of these kind of chemicals is not regulated. And so counties often do these kinds of programs complimentary for their residents because there's no other option for them otherwise. And landfills are hosted by a community. Even if those landfills are owned by the private sector, they are still hosted by a community and will be in that community forever. And so it suits communities that host landfills to host programs like this to keep this kind of material out of landfills and dispose of it properly, because landfills aren't guaranteed. Landfills can leak. And so we do have to be good shepherds of the materials we're putting in our landfills. Organics, we talked about the organics materials, and in many cases, you probably have a curbside yard waste pickup on a seasonal basis. You probably put your leaves or your grass clippings in paper bags and put them out to the curb. But food waste is starting to get some attention, and more cities like the city of Lansing are hosting food waste drop-offs. So if you have a party or a gathering and have a compostable bag, you can collect your food waste or your compostable products that you buy for your party, and you can drop them off at the city of Lansing or wherever that food waste is taking. And that is another way you can reduce your waste. And in this way in the space of organics, you help to fuel the compost that then is a product that farmers and landscapers buy to fortify and regenerate their soils. So there's benefits all around from doing the work we're doing. It's important to note here that local governments are the kind of primary holders of this kind of service. Either like in the case of the city of Lansing, either the city is providing these services to their residents themselves with their own staff and their own trucks and resources, or a city is contracting with a private sector service provider hauler to have that service provided to their communities. This is the most, I think, efficient way to deliver these services, is delivering them to a community as a whole, because then the service provider is guaranteed a certain volume of material because they can make money off of this material. Those recyclables are taken to a recycling plant and are sold. Those commodities are consolidated and sold on the open market. And again, the compost then or the yard waste and the food waste is turned into compost, and that compost is sold. There's a lot of Michigan, especially more rural parts of Michigan, that aren't served by the local government, and households are served by local recycling and trash collection services that provide service on a household basis. So, in a community outside of Ingham County, for instance, they might be able to choose from 3 different service providers. But more and more communities are demanding integrated waste management services. And that means not just waste, but recycling and organics collection as well as sometimes bulk pickup and even drop-offs to recycle all of those other materials. And it's up to us as residents to let our local governments know that these are services we want and are willing to pay for to make sure that we can do the right things with our materials at the end of their life. And so this takes me to something that's happening lately. If I could ask a question of you, I would ask you, have you heard of extended producer responsibility yet? This extended producer responsibility is happening really all over the world, and we're a bit late to the game here. But EPR is a policy approach that makes producers responsible for the impacts of their products along the life cycle of their product. So extended producer responsibility really requires everybody who's in this, consumption and production chain to be responsible in their role throughout the process. And how that gets interpreted in extended producer responsibility is that the producer becomes responsible to pay for recycling or handling services. Not necessarily for disposal services, because that's not what we really want to do with those materials, but pay for recycling because most local governments are already paying for our recycling, and by extension, we pay for those services. But extended producer responsibility puts the cost of end-of-life management of these materials on the product that you buy. So, so if you're putting that responsibility for the end of life on the product, then the producers have to come to the table to decide how they are going to provide those services to make sure that we keep the circular economy in motion at the end of that life. The burden becomes the producers to make that happen. So I'll give you, I guess I'll do this first. We think this is important for Michigan right now because every county in Michigan is looking at the waste that is generated in the county and trying to figure out if they need new facilities to manage that, if more services are required to get to the recycling rate. This means more cost for either that municipality or for the residents of that municipality, and those waste and recycling costs are only going up over time. If we use a producer responsibility approach, then we take the burden off local governments and people to pay for that, and then only people that are buying those products then are responsible for paying for those end-of-life costs. And ultimately, the recycler gets reimbursed for their costs rather than paid for by the services they provide to the resident or to the local government. So you're internalizing the cost of end-of-life waste in the product that you buy, and we think that's a very appropriate way to deal with end-of-life problems. So as I said, extended producer responsibility really happens all over the world. Canada, Europe, India, even Russia is doing producer responsibility. Um, EPR has been used across the United States for a variety of materials. We have programs, and I will give our bottle bill is a EPR-like program that makes the cost, that puts the cost on recycling that by putting a cost on that bottle. That doesn't necessarily pay for that bottle, but that assures that consumers will bring that bottle back to the store so they can be managed. In other ways, let's take carpet, for instance. In New York, anybody who is purchasing a new carpet will have to pay extra for that carpet. And then at the end of life of that carpet, when you're taking that carpet out of your house, there will be a recycling program available for you for free to manage that carpet because your purchase price paid for those services. It's the same for paint. There are paint programs all over the country that they've negotiated or a relationship with the paint retailers to take paint back to the store, and that paint is recycled and reformulated into new products for use. And so it is not a burden anymore on that local government because there's another system that is created to manage that. I'll draw your attention to two specific ones that I'll talk a little bit more about. Batteries have become a real challenge for in waste and recycling, and I'll say more about that in a minute. And we're really starting to lean into battery recycling. And the stuff that we throw in our recycling carts every day, the packaging and printed paper, EPR is something that's been passed now in 7 different states, and it's something that we are exploring for Michigan as well. So I'll talk a little bit more about the battery problem just to give you an idea. The battery problem is really a bipartisan problem. It's bipartisan because if batteries aren't handled well, if they're damaged in transit or in storage, they can cause fires. They can spark and they can cause fires. So there have been fires in homes. There have been fires in garbage trucks. There's been fires at recycling plants. There have been fires at landfills because of batteries. So we're keenly aware that there's a battery safety issue, but batteries also contain critical minerals. And if we can figure out how to recycle these effectively and efficiently, then we can capture the critical minerals in the batteries to make new batteries and other products. And so there's a lot of reason to lean into the battery issue. And we're kind of leaning into this year. We hope to introduce a bill, I think in a matter of days now, that will be labeled a battery safety bill, but it's really a battery extended producer responsibility bill that will require battery producers to pay into a fund. And that fund then reimburses recyclers for collecting and sending these batteries to effective processors. Just to give you an idea, there are so many different batteries that we're talking about right now. The classification of batteries that we're talking about are really small format batteries. So we think about your alkaline batteries, think about your button cell batteries, think about the batteries that are attached to tools, vacuum cleaners that you can detach. We're talking about those batteries. We are not yet talking about embedded batteries, batteries that you can't easily take out of phones or electronics, because that's a much bigger, more challenging issues. But we are talking about any batteries that you can take out of outdoor power equipment and others. This may not be as clear as I want it to. I might have to change that for my next presentation, but embedded batteries and car EV batteries are going to have to be dealt with in different legislation. We're really talking about batteries you can isolate and return. Those are the batteries we're targeting for this bill that's coming up. Um, what's interesting about recycling is that we've had programs throughout the country that would help us recycle many of our products. Call to Recycle is started out as a voluntary producer responsibility operation of battery manufacturers. So battery manufacturers, producers got together to say, let's all contribute to a fund and to a nonprofit. We'll call it Call to Recycle, but I think its name changed recently. And then we will help to support programs in retail centers or in communities to take back some of these batteries. And so we do have programs that exist even around Michigan. Bulbs and Batteries Plus will accept batteries. Many counties will accept your batteries, but it's not a robust collection system. And we're hoping with this EPR passage of this EPR for batteries issue that we really can create a more robust, comprehensive battery recycling program. But then we can build upon to collect other batteries like those embedded batteries that I've talked about. And Michigan is unique in this case because we have battery manufacturers and processors, significant processors here in Michigan that can help us do this. And then I'll talk about packaging. Packaging, EPR for packaging I think, is the golden goose. We, the Michigan Recycling Coalition, are going to be working on EPR policies for probably a variety of materials, carpet and mattresses and paint and household hazardous waste, because we think it is most effective when the cost of the end of life management of that product is included in the cost of the product. That's the only way really to make producers responsible and change the design or fabrication of a particular product to make it usable in the system. And microplastics and our growing concern and research around microplastics is moving this conversation around extended producer responsibility for packaging in a really interesting way. And so how this would work, let's see, I don't know what my other slide is. How this would work, this is just a list of companies in Canada right now that pay for Canada's recycling program. This is not a full list, but these are some of the companies that also sell products in this country that are not held responsible for the life cycle of their project or of their products. So, EPR for packaging would work, for example, like if you bought a bottle of water, the producer of that bottle of water might have to pay like a half a penny into a fund per bottle of water that we produce. And as you can imagine, with all the different things that we buy and consume, that would grow quite large, that fund. And that fund would be redistributed to those communities, those private sector partners who are actually managing their material, to reimburse them for the cost, so that cost is not coming out of our pockets any longer through our waste and recycling costs. It comes out of our pockets when we purchase those products. And it makes it more fair and equitable as to how we manage end-of-life products, because if we don't provide the market signals back to the producer about end-of-life management, they will never get information about how their products could be packaged better to meet recycling requirements and to be more environmentally preferable. So I guess I'll end here by saying that recyclers don't really manage waste. Recyclers produce feedstock for the manufacturing of new products. We talk about inorganic material, that's plastic, glass, paper, metal. We also talk about organic materials. All of these things are managed productively because we can make new products out of them. And so paying close attention to your recycling lists, not putting material in your curbside carts that shouldn't belong there, finding out where you can drop your material off is really the name of the game here. We aim to provide residential education and support to people doing this work. We work with professionals all across Michigan, and we hope to arm them with good information to standardize messaging around recycling so we are clearer and clearer in the information and the instructions that we give to people. And professionals are talking about this all the time. We have a conference coming up. We expect about 400 people at this conference on May 11 through 13 in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And you might be interested in checking out our website. We will have more and more resources coming online all the time. And I really appreciate the opportunity to share this story with you. Thanks,
Thank
Ellen.
you, Karen. That was a lot to learn, so thank you very much. Our next speaker is Daniel Schoonmaker, an accomplished environmental educator and advocate, and since 2013, the first executive director of the Michigan Sustainable Business Forum. Under his leadership, what began as a regional conversation among like-minded professionals grew into the preeminent sustainable business program in the Midwest, now spanning 5 communities across mid-Michigan. Daniel has led research into the hidden value buried in Michigan's municipal solid waste, helped businesses identify
Hey,
their
Ellen. I'm just going to start rolling. I think we're a little short on time now, aren't we?
Okay, sorry.
How long do I have?
Okay. How much time do you have?
About 15?
Oh, more than that. Let's see, probably.
I would say, don't worry about it, Daniel. You can go on until past 8. We're going to cut the Q&A on you. Okay.
I deleted a couple slides, so I should
You
be able
deleted
to.
it. If you take a half an hour or more, that's just fine. Okay. Don't worry about it. We're not gonna cut you short.
I'm sure people have other things to do today, so I'm gonna. I'll be brisk. So I don't often follow Karen, and it's quite the delight because a lot of the stuff I would talk about, I can't do it as well as she does, and I'm just happy to learn from her. And every time I was actually thinking when the last time I actually saw a presentation from MRC, and always a great opportunity to learn. So I'm also going to talk about the circular economy today. And should be seeing my screen right now. Ellen, are you seeing my screen?
Yeah.
All right. So when I think of landfills, this is what I think of. So I think you can see landfills and you see there's a lot of different ways to envision them. They're a community asset. And, until we really figure out the circular economy, we do need a hole to put things in if we're not utilizing, say, like a waste energy facility like we have here in Grand Rapids. But we could talk about the water issues, talk about the impacts they have on real estate and how that the value of property goes down depending on how many miles you are from a landfill. We could talk about what kind of my emerging favorite way is about methane emissions. And this is a infrared photo over a landfill in Illinois. Look about the same if you're to do it from most of the ones in Michigan. They are super emitters of greenhouse gas emissions. So my organization, we work with business institutions to advance sustainability practices across the states, focused on sustainability practices and to a lesser extent public policy. Climate leadership, social justice, and the circular economy is how we define sustainability. Or if you're coming from a different framework, beyond compliance, regulations, or the triple bottom line of people, planet, profit. So if you take away one thing from the 10 minutes or so that I'm going to chat with you, It's that Michigan has a $8 billion opportunity. Karen referenced this in one of her slides. So we've done a number of studies in partnership with the states and Grand Valley State University and our member organizations to figure out what is the actual value of the circular economy based on what it is that we're currently losing in terms of opportunity. So at this moment, we are going to dispose of $6.2 to $8.3 billion of market material by 2035. So essentially the period of which the state's My Healthy Climate Plan goes. That is around $500 million to $676 million per year. And if you were to somehow magically pull all of that material out of the waste stream and put it back into manufacturing supply chains, that would lower the actual price of the material. And so with those market effects, it's a little bit less, 432 to 576, but still a substantial value that we are just literally throwing away. And that would have a value that would have an economic impact of up to 5,000 jobs and nearly $1 billion in annual economic activity. But then I guess, as I mentioned, that is a difficult value to obtain. Like if it wasn't hard, we'd already be doing it. So how do we know this? We actually had a team of people led by my colleague Carrie go out to transfer stations and landfills around the state and sample material that was coming out of the Packer trucks. And what we came up with was a by percentage composition of what we're currently throwing away. I want to point out that food waste is 19%. Another organic material and another mostly recycled material, paper is 24%. And then we talk a lot about plastic. Plastic's only 10 to a high of 15% of our municipal solid waste treatment present. If we break that down by actual categories, food waste again is the most common thing we're currently throwing away, 19.2% of our waste stream. And this is consistent with just about every state in the union. Food waste is the thing we throw away the most. And then we'll have just kind of our miscellaneous category, then cardboard, and everything else is a bit less. Now, what we did, and I deleted a couple slides here for the purpose of time, but the general gist is we work with a lot of organizations that are recyclers, and many of these are all members of MRC as well. And when we did this, we went and asked them, what do you get based on your rolling averages for a ton of processed material in a given year? And we figure out a way to do that for the value of compost and the value of textiles, et cetera, where we could create some apples to apples. And this is what we came up with when we added it all up and what the actual value is. So metal, though it's a very small percent of our waste stream, does have a pretty significant value, 183 million. And plastic, though it is a bit smaller, does have a pretty substantial value in the market. Even though there are a lot of lower value plastics and very difficult to recycle plastics in the waste stream. So when I get to it, I like to highlight this slide. And what you see here is we have a line graph that compares what the actual value of the material is versus how much of it we have. And that's the bar graph. And where I like to draw people's attention to are two items. One, cardboard. And that's really the only material in which we have a large supply of it currently being disposed of in our municipal solid waste stream. And it has a high value. Also, I might add that it is probably the most common and easiest thing to recycle, to the fact where many businesses, if they're recycling only one thing, it's probably cardboard. And then I also highlight food waste. because by far there's the most of it of anything else in landfill. So if we really do want to take a chunk out of what's going to the landfill, and especially if we want to take a chunk out of what's happening with emissions, we should think about targeting food waste. So finding some notes that I'll highlight for you. Again, over the next 10 years, $8 billion opportunity. Corrugated cardboard, food waste, other organics, those should be our top priorities. Those are what's creating the methane that is making landfills a super emitter. Those are where we're going to find the biggest bang for our buck from an environmental improvements. Electronic waste and lithium-ion batteries, something that I think is important to highlight as citizens and voters. And when we did this, I was really surprised by how many vape pens we found in the waste stream. And I'll say this is a category that I am not very familiar with. These electronic cigarettes that apparently all the young folks do now, or the old folks, my father-in-law. We estimate there's about 30 million of those currently being disposed of in Michigan. And that really surprised me. That's electronic waste, and there's batteries in there, and that is something that I think is an interesting problem we're going to have an opportunity to unpack over the next few years. Now, as I get into this, I want to note that 60% of municipal solid waste are single-use products, and the vast majority are low-value materials. Now, that would include things like food waste, but that also include things like single-use packaging. That's the EPR bills that Karen and MRC are looking forward. I'll also note that we talked about how a lot of the value of this may be theoretical. That's because a lot of our ability to access that is actually difficult to attain, and the operational costs may outweigh the benefit. Plastic bags are a good example. Plastic bags, if you collect them and compact them, they're actually a fairly valuable commodity. But most recycling centers don't want to manage them because they're very challenging to do so. They tangle up the material, they get all over the place. So it's just the operational costs do outweigh the benefits. And finally, based on what we're measuring is the actual value of the cost of processing the material. Only 17% of it will pay for itself if you just leave this conversation alone to the markets. So everything else is material that's low value and would probably merit some regulatory action, such as EPR, for instance. Currently, the system is essentially being subsidized by just 17% of the material. Briefly, I'll highlight we take down the difference between residential and commercial loads. I want to note that cardboard much more common among commercial loads, and then we think of things that probably make a little less sense, like PET bottles, plastic containers, things you associate with meals and eating and kind of consumer lifestyle, and then of course food waste, all of it much more common to residential loads, and then wood and construction demolition waste, those are also more common in the business loads. So as a response to this, we again work with the state of Michigan and other partners to develop a plan to attack one of the things that we thought was the lowest hanging fruit, figuratively and literally, food waste. And we worked to develop a product called the Michigan Food Waste Roadmap. And that is a stakeholder-driven initiative, and to reduce food loss and waste by 50% by initially we started out, we say 2030, and just to not spoil it, I don't think we're probably going to hit that mark, but I think if we do move forward on our recommendations, so invest in protection, double food rescue, and increase food waste processing through especially compost infrastructure, that would get us there where we need to be and likely exceed it. So briefly, talk about the difference, what it is we're actually talking about when we talk about food waste. So that's actually two different phenomena. One, we have food loss, and that's about a quarter to a third of what we call food waste or surplus food. And think about that as food you couldn't have eaten. So it was never harvested on the farm. It was lost in the manufacturing process. Uh, went like went bad in storage, went bad during transportation, lost on the way. You might also call this shrinkage. And food waste is food that you could have eaten. It actually made it to the to the retailer. It made it to the restaurant, and for whatever reason, it wasn't purchased. It wasn't served. It wasn't eaten if you actually got it to your plate or brought it into your home and put it into your pantry. And that is actually the majority of it. So approximately 70%. Now, talk about how we address this issue with some of the solutions. I'm going to highlight three things real quick. First, end of life. How we actually dispose of the material once it's done. We need to dramatically improve that. Food waste currently accounts for just 1% of the material composted in commercial facilities in Michigan. The Michigan actually does have, in comparison to the average state, a fairly robust compost industry because we have a yard waste ban. Like we have a history of composting things through our municipal waste stream, but very small amount of that is currently food waste. This here is a gentleman, Louis Chen, who's runs a company called Wormies in Grand Rapids, launched with a focus on food waste. And if you were to count the number of companies that are currently processing this, you don't usually need more than two hands. So there's a fairly limited number of people who are doing this, and that needs to improve substantially. So really by a factor of 100 for us to be able to achieve not just our food waste goals, but our landfill diversion goals and our recycling goals. The other thing I'll highlight is food rescue. So we added it up, and based on the amount of edible food sent to landfills from commercial businesses, so think restaurants, food manufacturers, and unharvested food on farms, Michigan businesses currently waste enough food to feed every hungry family in Michigan. And that's a pretty powerful statistic when you think about it, is that we're wasting so much food that we are throwing away enough meals to feed everyone that is currently having an issue accessing food. And we think this is a great opportunity to address. Regardless of where you are in your opinions about the environment, just about everybody thinks that hunger is something that we should be working on. So it's a natural bipartisan issue, and one of the few things that a few things we think would resonate in a currently divided House. So the last solution that we're currently working on is various ways in which we can prevent waste in the beginning. So if we're looking from a business perspective, and that's where we come with it, how do we make businesses more sustainable? End of solutions, when they're available, are actually the most accessible. So if you're a company and you have a waste product, what you really want is someone to take it away. And so you're searching for a recycler. And that's your goal here, to find someone who can recycle the product for you, or take it, or if not only that, process it responsibly. But there are what we think higher impact solutions available to you that probably are a bit more capital and resource intensive and require a bit more thought to be able to prevent that waste from ever happening in the future. So in like a food processing or manufacturing or durable goods manufacturing standpoint, this thing like optimizing lines and design to reduce waste, dynamic pricing, also valorizing waste streams and byproducts. So again, looking at food waste in this picture here, this is an example of a leather alternative that can be derived from apple mash. So there's opportunities that we're trying to explore from within the current waste stream and build out and build them out into new opportunities that are optimizing that circular economy. And finally, engagement education, so that everyone recognizes the problem. put every part of their effort to reducing race before it begins. Now, as this is the League of Women Voters, I thought I'd leave a couple policy ideas for you. Earlier, you heard a lot about EPR in its various forms and functions. I'll also put a few other on your plate. So, right now, as you heard in Karen's presentation, every county or group of counties needs to put together a sustainable materials management plan. One thing I would be keeping on is what goals are they setting in those plans? The state has set certain benchmarks of things that need to be in the plans, but there is a lot of flexibility for each community to set its own goals. And one of the things I think is at least in the baseline is that counties go into it and they say, we want to get organics, we want to get food waste out of the landfills. So part of this plan should be to reduce methane, or however they want to talk about it. If they want to talk about it as food, that's good too. But like that should be a priority, is to reduce that stream as a goal that they're able to resource and plan around. I'd like to highlight currently in the House, HB 5166 was a tax credit for donation of food. Right now, there's consideration. It has yet to get a hearing for a tax credit that would especially target farmers to provide them an incentive to do that last cleaning, or otherwise get product into the charitable food system that they might otherwise, as well as other food businesses, to be able to offset some of the costs of doing so. I'll also flag two other issues. PA 275 is the renewable energy bill that was passed a few years ago. Currently, the state of Michigan's Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy is developing a set of guidelines for the use of landfill renewable natural gas within that. So you can capture the methane from landfills and use it as renewable energy, and get credits for that generation. But there were guidelines set so that we're not providing renewable energy credits to landfills that are not operating in a sustainable way. So with those guidelines that are currently being developed, and the state of Michigan just hired a contractor to put them out, they should be coming out later this year. Those should provide specific guidance on what does a responsibly run landfill would look like in terms of methane capture. And finally, this isn't something that's, I think, it's really being all that actively talked about in Michigan, but a food waste separation bill, I think, is going to come at some point in the state. So legislation that would require food waste to be separated from landfill streams and most likely composted, but not necessarily. That's something that a dozen other states have, and will likely be likely be the end game by which we are able to pull the material out of the waste stream finally. And I don't know if I actually have time for questions, because I don't want to keep people too over, and I know I went a little over 8, but happy to take any if you do want to keep us around, Ellen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schoonmaker. There's so much material there to follow up on. Sharon, are you going to handle the questions now for our speakers?
I'd be delighted to. I have to say that I fully agree with you that was a lot of information, and it came at a little faster than I could actually take my notes. But let me start by asking each of you, start with you, Daniel, what do you think are the biggest obstacles that prevent business from adopting more of these policies? I know, Daniel, you've gone through and sort of carefully tried to describe the analysis that you did of the benefits that ultimately could be obtained. But is it just cost? Is it consumer behavior?
Well,
The need for capital was one of the items that you identified.
Yeah, uh, and I think if we're talking about businesses and businesses adopting solutions and policies versus, say, public policy, the uh, most of the time sustainability happens in the margins. So it's typically it's typically an act of optimization. So in rare occasions, there are companies that are built for sustainability and or they're providing a solution. But most of the time, if you're, say, a Mexican restaurant, uh, you're just trying to get by. And if the last thing you're probably going to think about is switching out your styrofoam for a BPI certified container. Even though you see the company, the restaurants that you aspire to look like and be like doing that type of thing, but you don't want it like uh, you're trying to survive and you're trying to support your family. I think that's where the issues are, and there's because the first thing the businesses want to do is make money, make livelihoods. And I think what we see is that there are really a couple of types of businesses that are able to advance sustainability in a meaningful way. Those that get to a certain point where there is a return on investment because they're large enough and they have customers that care about it. So like I'm in Grand Rapids, the office furniture industry really is set the pace for that. And that's because their customers care a lot about sustainability. So they care a lot about sustainability. Now, if you're again going to the Mexican restaurant, I say this because we have a Mexican restaurant program right now, and it's been a lot of fun trying to figure out because the people who work there and own these companies, they really support the environment, they support the community, but they don't really love the idea of paying 19 cents a unit for a takeout container. The uh, then we find that we have companies with people who work there who care about it and they force things because there's a return on investment because you want to have talent. And then we have owners that care a lot about it, so they work there and promote the talent. But a lot of times when we talk about sustainability, like it's a voluntary thing that we do because we want to have a benefit and be purpose driven. When it becomes something that has a uh, market response, at that point, it's just good business. And I think, like you see, like there's an entire recycling industry that doesn't necessarily that I think will often talk about itself as sustainability, but they're more likely to just say recycling. And maybe that's part of the conversation, and they feel and they're part of the movement, but really they're just doing it because it's good business. And so I guess it's a long way of saying that sustainability is hard because it works best when it's just good business. Otherwise, it's something that you're only able to do when you can do it.
Karen?
I'll just add on to what Dan said here is that one of the things we've been focused on for a very long time is making sure people have access to the services they need to be able to do the right thing. And so I think Dan said it really well that, if we're competing with landfilling, then we've got to make sure we can be competitive with landfilling. But, assuring, for example, using a compostable plate doesn't mean you're just paying for the compostable plate. You have to have the services of being able to pick up your material, your compost, to take it there as well. And so we're talking about kind of systems change and helping everybody get there. And the way we do that is helping Michigan business see that there are people there that will pay for those services. And we have to be those people in our businesses, in our households, where we live, work, and play.
Okay, so most of us all of us, I think it's fair to say, are consumers. What should we be doing and what should we not be doing uh, along those lines, Karen?
Gosh, I think part of this is really about talking about it and asking for it. Hey, do you have a compostable plate? Hey, or if so, oftentimes you'll go to a place that has the compostable plate. Do you have the composting services to go along with this compostable plate? It's helping to connect the dots and asking questions that help people make those connections in their head. But it's also us moving the system together. It's really challenging because it's really easy to just take that waste to the landfill. But we have to change the practices of our businesses by asking for and being willing to buy that stuff and connecting all those dots.
Yeah. Throw some shade. Like like where's your recycling? Uh,
Right.
I might also add that there are a lot of new people in uh, our ecosystem, the MRC ecosystem, who are trying to develop solutions. And one thing that might eyes an opportunity is, throw your business their way. So if you don't have uh, a compost service already, yeah, like depending where you are, if you're in a denser community, you might be surprised to find one there. I mean, there's one in Traverse City, there's a couple of Grand Rapids, there's somebody in Kalamazoo. So like the Traverse City one, they just they were hustling around on bikes picking up your compost. Uh, like if you're in a rural community, that might not be quite the case, but when you have these things, you have uh, take advantage of the service and help them grow.
And any recommendations on how to find out or spread the word better on those types of opportunities that might exist in communities?
Well, I hear there's a Michigan recycling guide out there that I think is probably a good place to start.
Yeah, I think for me, the first place is finding a place to take all of the recyclables that you're collecting and really getting into your community, find out like who's taking the textiles, who's taking the polystyrene, or who's taking the plastic film and the plastic bags, or my boat shrink wrap is taking the extra time to do that. Because if there is a company that's willing to collect and manage this material, give them the material that you have, because this recycling is a economies of scale game, which means that you need to have a mass volume of this to make truckloads of whatever it is you are doing. And so Ellen knows this with the Langsberg recyclers, but you really need to fill up a truck to make it cost effective to take that to the processor that can do something with that material. So really, we all have to participate in these programs that we have, because they will die without our participation.
Karen, what do you consider, from all the work you've done, what do you consider your biggest success story?
I would say that it is the funding that we won at the state level back in 2018, working with the then Governor Snyder. He was open to our issues when we brought them to the table, and our work with him really started this, I think, this evolution that we're now seeing the results of. Changes to Michigan solid waste law started under his time, but because he was an accountant, he knew the value of putting the money first. And we had the wherewithal and I think, put in the work ahead of time to be able to partner with him to help him. And together we were able to pass really the first time environmental funding for any environmental issue in Michigan was passed in 2018 for recycling. Other issues have since passed and gotten funding, but it was a really significant marker, not just for this industry, but for environmental work in Michigan. And I think that Michigan's environmental community really discounts recycling as one of the solutions, but it is the kind of the gateway and the lowest hanging fruit that we can participate in to do something productive for our environment. And I'm very proud that we've generated funding that has brought all kinds of new people to the table to help us elevate these issues and do more than I think has ever happened in our history. So pretty good place to be.
Daniel, success. You've done a great deal of work. What would you highlight as your biggest success story?
Uh, I might pass on that one a little bit because
Okay.
I'm relatively new, and I think I've been in a growth stage for 15
I,
years now.
I'll toot your horn for you, Dan. Dan's produced a couple reports that I think have been very consequential. The waste characterization report that helps to, you know, peg the amount of money that we could benefit in our economy, or how our economies can benefit, has been real important, especially to local officials and decision makers who think this is tree hugger stuff. No, this is an industry that puts people to work using materials that are already circulating in our economy. Us being able to show people the value of that is really important to local officials buying in and delivering programs for their community. So
You
I
know,
say it was good, Dan.
thank you, Karen. And I actually will highlight something that I want to comment on something Sarah Karen said, if you don't mind. Uh, the Now, we were really proud to work with the city of Benton Harbor the past couple of years and help them get $22 million in funding for a major initiative through a community change grant, as well as a bunch of other funding through the states and other partners. And like we also supported a similar grant of around the same size as Kalamazoo, and though we were less involved, Detroit got one also. And I don't know if you heard, but we have a new president in this country who doesn't like this sort of thing. And so all that stuff got wiped out. So
Oh,
that was something that was, we were really geeked about. And a lot of resources go into a community that really needs it. A lot of resources weren't going to go to Kalamazoo and Detroit. And this is just, drop in the bucket of all the things that were lost. So I would say, as the League of Women Voters, like I would just kind of keep that in mind that like a lot of uh, that like we really want to have elected officials that are supporting this work and keeping it going and consistent. And I will highlight like right now, there's like we don't necessarily know what the state of Michigan will look like politically next year. So a lot of the things that we've been really excited to work on over the past 8 years, things go one way or another, it's could be some major disruptions. So I would just kind of put that on your radar because I know that's a lot of the reason the chapter's here. I'd also like to quickly comment on something Karen said, because a lot of the environmental community, uh, those that aren't focused on pollution, so just trying to basically stop industry from throwing things in the environment, the solutions they have are not everyday solutions. They're capital intensive. You need to buy a new car. You need to switch out your windows. You need to put solar panels on it that really nobody who has kids at home can afford to do. And that's the case for just about all the solutions that you see coming out. Even the easiest ones, like put in a rain garden, those are not everyday things. Those are big. Those are big stuff. Those are I am making a major purchase type of stuff. Type of things. Recycling, composting. That's the thing that you do every day. And so that's the thing I highlight. Like this is Karen used the word gateway. I'd say this is everyday climate action.
excellent.
So if you had your top choice for what the state could do to assist our local units of government, um, what would it be?
Money,
Money in the
more
form of
money.
grants. And do you see that as the central role too for the federal government providing funding, tax credits, that sort of thing?
I'll chime in and
Oh,
say
yeah, of
I
course.
think we are dependent on our government to create the kind of environment for us where these kinds of innovative solutions to our everyday problems can exist and flourish and be supported. And it looks a lot of different ways. Policy is important, funding is important. Just, how we regulate waste is really based on a system where we disposed of all of it. And so now that we're trying to find solutions for all these different things, regulations have to be different, but that is a slow moving beast. And so there's not one bullet, but there really is a kind of mind shift that state government has to have around how they deal with these issues. And I don't think we're there yet.
I
So
think
with
that
all of the funding constraints and some of the political issues that, Daniel referred to, what do you think that local units of government should be focusing on now? What else should they be doing, or should their people be, their citizens be encouraging them to do? Obviously, implementing the new planning process.
Well, I think the planning process is really about local governments considering carefully what kinds of services residents and businesses need to be sustainable, to make those connections so that that Mexican restaurant doesn't have to choose between that and that, but has that. And so they don't have to pay for waste because they're paying for the compost. And the plates is just a small amount of money because we've already got this taken care of. It's really providing and growing the kind of necessary environment to make it easy for people to do what they need to do. But those are hard issues because oftentimes I think that political leaders don't see that they're going to get support for that kind of thing. And so they don't even try. And that's why they need to hear from us, because we want them to try.
Daniel?
I'll pick up on the last point from Karen. I think we talked a good bit about different policy, different policy opportunities are, but I think if at the bare minimum, if local leaders were to do one thing, I think it's speak with authority on why these things are important and take some responsibility for educating and influencing the populace. Because I think what we've really seen over the past year, especially, is there were a lot of battles that I thought we won a generation ago, and uh, concepts that did not seem controversial, uh, but because strong voices win out, they've managed to change the just general idea of what is appropriate for the public sector to be acting on. Uh, and so I really think that just if if our officials can't give money and they can't regulate and they can't do anything, if they can just speak truth, we're they're probably doing better than most.
So Sharon, do you have one more question that you might have time for? Or no?
Yes, no, absolutely. I just, you know, think we're all continuing to look for some guidance about, what we should go out and do tomorrow, say. Um, do you think I mean, obviously it's a mixture, but, in terms of, um, our local units of government, focusing on what the state government can do, focusing on our own purchasing and uh, disposal decisions, looking at the reuse, the reduce prong of the reduce reuse pieces of the
It's really
model.
all the things, right? And we're in a really strange place in our world right now. Everything feels a little bit upside down, and I feel like I'm groping for answers. But if I did say something, it was going to be think globally, act locally. It is participate in the programs that you have locally, get involved in politics locally, be thoughtful about your purchases. consumption is like voting, and if we don't need it, don't buy it. We all have to eat the stuff, and we're buying the stuff in the grocery store, but I really am seeing us as a consumer-based culture, and I think we all have to look hard at our consumption and be very careful about that right now.
Daniel, last answer to you.
The in a general way, I might just walk in your kitchen and see how many waste bins you have. And if you don't have three, you should add a couple more. Uh, 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 so I think in a consumer sense is where I would start. Because the like that's what this needs to look like. Where you need to compost, we need to recycle, and then the rest we throw away. If you only have two, like I say, before I had a child, I had two. And then the first 5 years I had a child, I still only had two, and I only threw away diapers. When I brought out the trash card and be like, I tell you what, hold on to your hat. The but now now we go to McDonald's and stuff, so it's different. The From a policy standpoint, I, I would reach it like whichever jurisdiction you're in. I would go to the website, check out the phone trees, whoever the most appropriate person, city manager, your local elected official, and just get probably local official, probably your elected official. And maybe if you even look at the county and see like who's on the materials management planning plan and pick off somebody who probably doesn't work for like a company that sounds like WM or Public Services, but uh, and just give them a holler, shoot them an email, give them a call. Elected officials, I mean, like they don't like they if they hear a constituent asking about that, they're going to remember that because they don't get that many constituent calls that are organic and not organized by somebody who's trying to rabble rouse. And so I think that's just the universal advice I said is just go ask them and make them, or I don't think you have to make them, but get them talking about them, get them to understand that these things are important to you,
Thank you.
or at the very least you're interested in them. That probably even do enough.
Thank you both very much. Ellen?
Oh, yeah, yes, thank you so much to our speakers and to everyone who watched this program, if you attended or will watch it, and for taking an interest in the environment and the circular economy. And remember, one of the most important ways things you can do to support the environment is to vote. So thank you and good night.